The 9/11 Silent Walk, a 4.5-mile walk from Charleston to Mount Pleasant in honor of the victims of the September 11 attacks of 2001 will happen next Wednesday, September 11th, here in the Low Country. I talk one-on-one with the founder of this event, Tian Griffieth, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Tian Griffieth, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you for allowing me to be back. I think this is our third time gathering. We've gathered in person. We're gathering today on Zoom. And so it's a privilege to always be here with you. What you do in our community and for our people and sharing and telling these stories is significant. And, at some point, they need to name something after you because, Quintin Close-Ups is definitely where you go when you want to have the word spread.
Oh, yes, sir. And I really do appreciate it. And I love this community greatly. So that's why I love doing these interviews. And I love telling your particular story because needless to say, you're the founder of the 9/11 Silent Walk, which will take place this coming Wednesday, next week, Wednesday. It's the 11th annual 9/11 Silent Walk. And that will actually be a 4.5-mile walk, which will begin in Charleston, downtown Charleston and East Bay Street in Gracebridge. And it will actually conclude with a memorial ceremony at the USS Yorktown in Mount Pleasant, which will honor the following on September 11, 2001.
Yeah.
Tell me, Captain, what's new, what's now with the 9/11 Silent Walk?
There's a lot of things that are new. I recently left the city of North Charleston and accepted a battalion chief's role in the city of Conway, and so we've moved to Myrtle Beach, and so it's a fantastic opportunity. My family's excited. I'm excited to be here. A lot of positive stuff going on here, and we're excited to see what this new journey is going to hold for us. And so the walk is it's always been bigger than me. It's not about me, and that shows when you talk about the partnerships that are willing to still be involved, regardless of where I am. Their participation, when they talk about the Mount Pleasant, City of Charleston, the Mount Pleasant Fire Department, the Police Department in Mount Pleasant, with Chief Arnold and Chief Mixon as well, and Chief Curria and Chief Walker now in City of Charleston. These leaders, they've made it certain, and that this will always continue to go on because of how fantastic it is to allow people to be together and gather for something positive.
This is a redundant question, Captain, but what's keeping this particular silent walk that is going for the past 11 years?
It's recently I saw in the news where there were 3 terrorists in Guantanamo Bay, and they were sentenced to death, and we have negotiated with them to allow them to have life in prison instead. There's some controversy around that. When you talk about the families who had members that were taken immediately, when you talk about the 2,977 victims that were lost that day, in that first 3 hours of the morning on September 11th on that Tuesday morning, 23 years ago now. And then now 3,000 almost since due to illnesses, through suicide, through physical respiratory illnesses and illnesses related to that day. 9/11 was no bullet. It was a disease, and it's continued to impact our culture and our history.
What is the biggest difference about the history and culture when you think of 9/11?
23 years ago, you would never imagine someone saying, that is tomorrow.
Right.
9/11. I totally forgot today was 9/11. As opposed to, 23 years ago, we were waiting on that day to come. We were waiting on Patriot Day to arrive. We were waiting on that day to arrive so we could reflect. And so, the further we have gotten away from the actual day and that actual event, as things move so fast today, we have truly seen, where people have kind of, departed the idea of the significance of that day in some form.
What is your reflection of 23 years ago? I remember I was a junior in high school at Burke when that happened. I was sitting, in the courtyard of Roper Hospital where my mom used to work before, she retired years later. But I remember that it was in the news and, we all were devastated. So 23 years later, where are you still emotionally?
I'll tell you, every year I get to look at the 415 faces, all those 8x10s of firefighters and police officers that died that day. I get to look at, the first person in alphabetical order when we produce those photos every year is Greg Atlas, Engine 10. And Greg Atlas was at Engine 10. He's the first name we see when we print everything in alphabetical order. He's the first name, but he's also the first person to report that there was a fire in that building on 9/11. And so, he was the first in many things, and he still was historically, he's still the first in alphabetical order. He's the first name you see, and he's the first person to report there was an emergency there. And so, when I think about the men and women that have sacrificed, the people that are still walking around today. Today is still Tuesday, September 11th, in their head, 2001, and in their hearts, because of somebody sitting there missing at their kitchen tables, missing around their families, the children that grew up, without a parent, or that have been orphaned as a result, of 9/11. I think that it's still very, 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 very real, and that kind of thought to me, it always makes it very real, always makes it very important.
I'm still 23 years later, still learning new things about 9/11 and what transpired on that day. Where are you with that?
There's always a story that even I mean, as close as I get to look at this each year, and I look at it pretty close, as close as I get a chance to look at it, I still learn something every year. I still learn, of something occurring that I didn't know about. I still learn about, someone telling me something, as far as someone like this year, Dennis Lacosta, he'll be speaking about his memories from that day. He was in Tower 1 in the North Tower when the first plane hit, and he was on the 18th floor working his way downstairs when the second plane hit the tower. And he recalls, fireman's radio saying, "Hey, another plane just hit the tower," and guys screaming, "Get over to the left. People are still coming upstairs. Firemen are coming up. They're trying to go upstairs to rescue people and try to effect rescues and try to make a difference." Those kinds of things, those aren't lost on many people. If you were there and you had someone that was really close to that day, if you were in that building, if you were on those city streets, if you worked for Con Ed, if you worked for the sanitation department, if you were in that city, if you were in that community, if you were in New Jersey, if you were in Pennsylvania, if you were in Virginia, those things are still very real. And that's one of the things that, as we look as a community, Charleston and South Carolina is an ever-changing community, and we're welcoming people from the North and from Virginia and from DC and from these areas regularly. And so I think it's a responsibility as Americans. I think that we have to make sure that we have a place, and we have a place to gather, and we have a place to make sure that those thoughts that they have, they remain sacred, and that they are important.
Important. So, from 9/11 to right now, what artifacts and what history are you bringing to the Silent Walk?
I'm bringing the people. The people are the artifacts, the survivors, the heroes. That walk those streets for years before 9/11. That can tell you about how they used to have a hot dog on the corner. And how they would go sit and look at the sphere, or how they would have these different things occur in life that would remind them, of what things were like prior to 9/11. Most of the relics and the things that we bring, are the people's and their memories, and the things that they're able to share and make things a reality for people that weren't there or even weren't born.
So let's fast forward to next week, Wednesday. Who,
Sure.
what, when, where, and how?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're going to have the buses or start shuttling people over to the Charleston side. I'm pulling up the timeline for you now, just so I have a fresh kind of surface here. In one moment. So this is kind of how it's going to go. 8:46, the walk will begin. We'll have a prayer being said by a member and a family member of from the Emmanuel 9 family, and so survivors, a husband of a person that passed that day will be sharing his a prayer that morning. It'll be Miss Myra Thompson's husband. And so he'll be coming and starting us off that morning. What a way to get started with him coming to share and, talking about, about a reason to keep going, a reason to keep living, a reason to keep moving. To have him come and start us off is incredible. We will have that prayer starting at 8:46. We will begin walking the 5.5 miles to Patriots Point. There will be water stations on the bridge for people if they need water, if they need nourishment, anything like that. We'll have things available to them. They will walk to Mount Pleasant. They'll get to Harry Hallman Boulevard, make that right on the Patriots Point Boulevard, and They will go directly to the USS Yorktown to the flight deck. Now they'll proceed up the escalator when they get there, and they'll look at the 415 faces of all the first responders that lost their lives that day. They will get to the flight deck and they will ring the ceremonial bell, honoring that person they're walking for, the fireman whose lanyard they're carrying. If it's firefighter Gary Box, they're gonna walk for Gary Box. When that is over at 10:30, we're going to have our remembrance ceremony that we've been having for the last 5 years. And that's become a very special part of our event because, when you talk about this tribute and what it is, it's something to go be there, symbolic and walk, but it's also important to have a place for people that can't physically do that, having them gather and have them be able to hear and share and spend time together. And so we will start off by having our ceremony that day is dedicated to Joe Coates, who was the emergency manager for Charleston, Canada, that recently passed. We've dedicated that service to him as we've done in the years for others that have been very played huge parts in our event. Joe Coates played a significant part in setting all of our things up when you talk about our planning and some of the safety measures that we put in place. He was very significant in that early on, and so we wanted to be able to have his family start the event off that on the flight deck with Miss Jessica Coates and her family. They'll be raising the FDNY and the NYPD flag on the flight deck. The Mount Pleasant Fire Department Honor Guard will be presenting the presentation of colors, and then we'll have Miss Aisha Kenyetta do the national anthem. She sang for us for the last 5 years, and it's fantastic to hear her start us off that day with that. We'll have an opening prayer by Cheeto Walker, who's the Chief of Police of the City of Charleston. And then I'll have a welcoming messages for everybody who is here, just letting them know, what my thoughts are for the day, what the message is for them to take back home, things to reflect on as we close the day out. And then we'll have our guest speaker, the Honorable Reggie Burgess from the City of North Charleston, the mayor. He will be there to speak. And then we will have Deputy Chief Will Vinay from Ladies Island St. Helena Fire Department, who will be there as well to give his remarks on why 9/11 is important to him. Following that, we will have Miss Aisha will also bless us with Amazing Grace. And that is usually right about when she finishes that, we're in a place where we're ready to accept that the words of Mr. Dennis LaCosta. And Mr. LaCosta will come and tell his memories and share his stories from being in Tower 1 on 9/11. And following that, we're going to close it out with just a couple of closing notes, closing thoughts. And that'll be the end of our service, and that'll be the end of what we're providing that day as far as everybody gathering on 9/11.
Wow. This sounds so exciting and uplifting. So if it's not too late, how do we sign up for this?
Everything's still on Eventbrite. Registration will be open until 9/11. I think about 8 o'clock that morning it shuts down. But we keep it going until about 8 o'clock. Just so anybody says, wake up and they feel, you know what, I want to do something today. I don't want to lay in bed. I'm not saying cut work or skip class. But if they have a desire to be together and think about the things that happened on 9/11, this is a place for them to gather.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Captain Tian Griffieth, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you. And I appreciate your time. Keep doing what you're doing. It's fantastic. And we need more of it.
Oh, yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you.